And that horrific crash, the deadliest in Metro North history. 6 people in all lost their lives that February night. Good evening, everybody. I'm Keith Coombs.
I'm Ann Nyberg. Alan Brody, the husband of the woman who found herself trapped in her SUV on the track, says insufficient warning signs and lights are to blame. He's speaking out exclusively to News 8. News 8's Ann Craig joins us live in the studio tonight with his story. Ann?
Well, Alan Brody and his wife were supposed to be celebrating their silver anniversary soon. Instead, now he's dedicated to honoring her memory with much-needed railroad crossing safety changes. He was on the phone with Ellen just 5 minutes before that deadly crash and says she was so full of life, so happy, and in no way meant to hurt herself and especially others on the train. Alan and I went back to that crossing where his wife's life came to a tragic end. He's speaking exclusively to News 8 at that painful location in hopes of saving lives.
The back of the car was right here.
Alan Brody took us to the very spot where his wife Ellen, of nearly 25 years, was killed. Her SUV slammed into by a Metro North train.
I have no choice but to come back here and show what happened. It's my mission. This is not... I would stay here. I would stay here every day if I had to, if that's what it took to make it right. Here you go. There, it's coming right down. That's it.
The first thing you notice at the crossing, even with those flashing lights, it's silent. No warning bells, just birds chirping.
And now he's coming on the same track. This is the track that he came on.
We wait for the train. From the time the gates come fully down,
It's about 22 seconds.
22 seconds, that's all for Ellen to figure out how to react. He says the crossing gates came down, trapping her SUV on the tracks. She was lost, oblivious, a train barreling towards her.
She had no reason to believe that she was on a railroad line. She had no concept.
You see, on the night of February 3rd, Alan says a detour on the Taconic Parkway led his wife here to a crossing she had never been to before, one she had no idea existed. When the train crashed into her, it led to a fiery explosion, killing the mother to their 3 daughters and 5 people on board that train.
My wife just got very, very unlucky. And so unfortunately, and so did the people on the train, because believe me, we think of them all the time.
Alan blames a lack of warning signs. Now you have to remember we're out here in broad daylight, but Alan reminds us that when Ellen was crossing through the cemetery, it was the dead of winter. It was pitch dark. Traffic was backed up at the light because of that detour. Those white crossing signs that you see there aren't lit up at night, and he says the red flashers didn't start until Ellen was already on the tracks.
These things only activate when the train is coming, and then it comes down. You have 3 seconds. So if you're driving along and the traffic just stops, you're stuck.
He showed us the only warning sign leading up to the tracks before that blind curve. He says the state of New York knew years ago this location was an accident waiting to happen.
In 2009, the DOT did a survey and determined that this was inadequate and gave them money. They actually gave them about $130,000 to improve the warning system. It was never installed.
That is part of a lawsuit his family has just filed against the state of New York, Metro North, and others. He wants this Commerce Street crossing closed until upgrades are made to fix what he says is a Russian roulette death trap.
I know that people are going through tragedies, and they always want to make sure it doesn't happen to the next person. But this is really a case where we can do that, because everything you see is really quite simple.
Well, Alan tells me about 100 Metro North trains a day cross that railroad crossing there. He says going as much as 60 miles an hour. He says it's just wrong to have that much power crossing through an area so poorly marked. And he points out how horribly ironic that right there in one of the wealthiest places in America, they have a rickety, run-down old crossing that serves very little purpose, in his opinion, putting lives at stake every single day.
And I have to ask you, almost all these crossing signs are very old, decades old. How hard would it be to improve them with some new technology?
Well, that's what Alan points to so easily. He's also a conductor of trains, which is really interesting that he has that history. He says those signs that we see every single day go back to 1926. He calls them archaic. They're just dinosaurs sitting there. And then he really points to our cell phones. He says, look, when it comes to our phones, we have the greatest technology in the palm of our hands.
Right.
But yet that technology doesn't exist at railroad crossings. So he'd like to see that change.